And so glad everyone can join us today to talk about our favorite topic, real estate, and amongst our favorite people, Colgate alumni and students. Fascinating times we find ourselves in. Doing a Zoom in this world has become quite common for me and for many of us. Something I hadn't done until about March. Now it's a daily occurrence. But pretty amazing that we can connect over the summer and start to talk about careers. It's something, admittedly, I didn't think of until late in my tenure at Colgate, but it was exciting once I got started. And as soon as I realized real estate is where my passion lies, I never looked back. And so we're really excited to talk about it today. We're going to give you an overview of the industry so you can, if you're just starting to think about real estate, so you can start to wrap your head around the many, many ways you can get involved and be in the real estate business, either directly or tangentially. There will be a lot of information covered in a pretty short period of time, but everyone on the Zoom today is happy to answer more questions offline, and feel free to contact us. I'm very pleased to be able to present alongside Laura Denenga, class of 11, and Charlotte Redican, class of 19. We're each going to weigh in from our own perspective as we go through thoughts on the industry today. I'm going to start by just giving you a very short background for myself, and then I'll turn it over to Laura and Charlotte, and they can do the same before we jump in. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and went to Colgate all the way from Portland. And when I showed up on the first day, it was sight unseen, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Loved every single minute. And after Colgate, I knew I wanted to be in the greatest city on earth, New York City. It took me a couple years to get here, but a couple years after I graduated, I found myself looking for a job in real estate in New York. And I was, hustling. I was pounding the pavement, meeting as many people as I could. And I found a lot of willing alumni with open doors, ready to talk and share thoughts and help in any way they could. I've tried to do the same since that time with any students who have approached me. I spent months looking around, but was incredibly lucky to find an opening at a company called Related here in New York City. Turns out today may know them as one of the biggest, largest prolific developers in the world. They're building Hudson Yards in Manhattan. The chairman is Stephen Ross, that owns the Dolphins. But there wasn't that company when I joined in 2002. And I did a bunch of different things that related. I was in affordable housing, which is a really interesting, great place in the business that you might not think as much about initially, but it's something that's very interesting. I also did real estate development while I was there. So I got to see a lot of different parts of the business. And in late 2009, 2010, I left Related during the Great Recession to start a business. And I was extremely lucky to have the experience I earned or learned at Related and a lot of relationships to leverage. And I decided to focus on the hotel business, which has been my bread and butter ever since. And we've bought more than 30 hotels around the country, which we own and operate today. Unfortunately, as of today, they're not doing so well, as you might have read the news. But we're actually we're doing just fine, and we're gonna get through it. No, a little worse for the wear, but we'll get through it just fine. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Laura to give a quick background on herself and what she's up to, and then to Charlotte.
Great, thank you, Chad. So I'm Laura Denenga. I'm class of 2011. So I came to Colgate in 2007 as an international student. So I grew up in Harare, Zimbabwe. And was very lucky to find the small gem of a university in Hamilton, New York. I was a field hockey player, so that was the impetus for me joining the university was through the field hockey team, but was really lucky to then find all the doors that it opened up for me to be at Colgate. So my first job out of university was through a Colgate alum who's actually very active with the university and also within real estate. So his name is Kurt Wright, and he heads up a company called Quadrant Real Estate Advisors. And so it was my senior year. I was an economics grad. I knew I wanted to go into financial services, but hadn't quite honed down what my career path was going to be. And up came a job offer on Colgate Connect that was in real estate, and that was with that company. And so that's opened up a whole world of opportunities for me. So I worked 2 years in Atlanta. I'm primarily focused on financing in real estate. So everything I've done to date is mostly debt related. And I worked 2 years in Atlanta with Quadrant, and 2 years in, Kurt came over and said, I'm opening up an office in London. Would you want to go? And of course I said yes. I don't know who would say no to that opportunity. And so in 2013, packed my bags and came to London and had an amazing opportunity to help grow Quadrant's business in the UK and in Ireland. And then more recently, I've joined Allianz Real Estate, which is now become actually one of the biggest real estate investors across the world. We have about 73 billion of assets under management, and that's across equity and debt, so across buying real estate and lending on real estate. And we have offices in New York as well, also in Los Angeles, in London where I am, and in Paris and Munich. So it's been an incredible journey coming from Hamilton to Atlanta, and now to London, but working all across Europe, and really that's in large part thanks to Colgate. And yep.
All right, well, great. So this is my first ever panel, everyone. So if I'm not as smooth or eloquent as Chad and Laura, I apologize, but I'll do my best. So I graduated last May. I graduated Colgate last May. I was an econ major and poli-sci minor, but didn't technically get that on the diploma. But anyways, so I came in freshman, sophomore year thinking I wanted to be a banker, to do investment banking. It's what my family's done. It's kind of just what I was planning on doing. Interned 2 summers at PNC Bank in their capital markets group, and kind of decided that it wasn't really for me. I wanted something a little bit more tangible. I wanted to, I loved buildings, and I just really liked talking to people and connecting with folks. So I ended up finding real estate, speaking to someone at PNC who does something similar to what Laura does, and really liked it, and ultimately dropped ship and decided to start my senior year looking for jobs in real estate. So I kind of went through and pounded the pavement, as Chad said. Literally, I think spoke to almost everyone who graduated from Colgate and was in real estate, and in New York City primarily. And hey, you know what? It sounds so crazy and you hear it all the time, but you know, I spoke to as many people, and I really used the Colgate network, and you know, found a job through a Colgate guy who connected me with this guy, and now here I am working on his team. So that's kind of how I got to where I am now, which is brokerage for Cushman and Wakefield. It's a global brokerage and services company. And as I said, I'm in the New York office, and I'm in their middle markets group. So I basically help sell buildings that are under $75 million in Midtown East. So that's what I do, and hope that these slides coming up will help kind of, we're starting at the first floor, so hopefully this will clear some things up for everyone.
Okay, shall I get into it? So effectively what we thought would be a nice way to help illustrate all the different areas or opportunities there are within commercial real estate is to talk through a case study. I'm a bit biased because this is one of my favorite places in London. It's called King's Cross, and it's just an incredible regeneration of old warehouses, but also ground up construction of offices, of residential apartments, of student accommodation. So it's a great illustration of a commercial project, probably a big one, and probably one of the biggest ones that you get. But through that, we'll be able to show you all the different areas within the industry that you could potentially pursue. So just a summary, if you're familiar with London, King's Cross is about 2 miles north of the city centre, where you see Covent Garden there. And as I said, it's one of the largest developments at the moment. It's about 67 acres. When it's all said and done, there'll be 50 new buildings, about 3.4 million square feet of offices. So that's a lot of offices. Retail shops, so you'll have galleries, you'll have grocery stores, you'll also have a bit of a high street or shopping mall. And you'd also have residential apartments. So they're going to build about 2,000 new residential apartments. And then they've also incorporated a bunch of public space that just makes it a pleasant place to be around. Just a little bit of background. So the area itself, the reason why it exists is it used to be a big transportation hub that brought in a lot of the coal, grains, and potatoes from outside of London into London. So it was pretty much warehouse use and transportation use. But when railway came in, canals weren't used as much. It went into a bit of disuse and became quite contaminated. So it was a large area within London that just was no longer being used until about 96, when the landowners, which was DHL as we currently know them, and London Continental Railways, which is a UK government-owned railway entity that owned the land, they decided to redevelop it. And from now on, I'll call them the owners. So typically in real estate, you wouldn't have a government entity or DHL owning the land. So they had to bring in someone more experienced, someone specializing in regeneration. So they brought in a company called Argent to help them regenerate the whole site. Which brings us to, I guess, the first phase of what we could call acquisition. As a first phase of any real estate transaction is identifying a site or a piece of land or an existing building to either reposition it or to take the income from it. So this is London and Continental Railways and DHL already own the land. So it's a bit different in this case because they didn't have to acquire it. They'd owned it for years. But typically in real estate, you'd be looking to acquire it. And Charlotte can take it away since she acts in sales and disposition, so she can talk to us about acquisitions a little bit.
Yeah, so while at Cushman and Wakefield, we only represent sellers. You know, again, I go out and have to find these buyers, so I deal with a lot of people that are interested in acquiring buildings. So high level, it's really just, you know, you want to buy real property. That could be a building that's existing. It could be a piece of land. It could even be air rights. And who this is, it really varies. I mean, you can have institutional buyers that are very large companies. You can have little tiny kind of one user people that basically want to come in and use the space as their office or live in it, etc. And so each of those various potential buyers have, you know, different risk appetites, and they're looking for buildings of a certain asset class or in a certain location. So you know, it varies obviously. And kind of just touching on that to speak to these slides here, the players in this is the owners. So you've got the buyer, the owner, or like the buyer, and then you've got the seller who owns the property. You've got agency firms, which would be kind of like a Cushman and Wakefield, and we basically just broker these transactions. And then legal firms that deal with all the kind of paperwork, the offers, the letters of intent, and kind of getting it across the finish line. And I think that should generally do it for acquisitions.
I'll just add a small piece. I've spent the vast majority of my career in the acquisitions role, business, and predominantly last 10 years in hotels and also in affordable housing and other types of distressed real estate in the Great Recession, like office and distressed residential properties. I'll say if you're interested in real estate investments, acquisitions and development are natural, and we'll be talking a lot more about roles in development throughout the presentation today. But as far as acquisitions goes, I think it's an excellent place to learn the real estate business as a whole. If you're interested in the investment business in real estate, acquisitions is a big part of the universe. And what I think a lot of people envision development being a really exciting place to spend their careers. But as it turns out, I spent about 5 years in development and the rest of my 18 years in real estate in acquisitions. And those 5 years in development, I worked on about one or two projects. And in the other, 13 years in real estate, if that's what it is now, I think, yeah, 13 odd years, I've worked on hundreds of acquisitions. And so I've gotten to learn about different asset classes and different markets and different players. And, to me, the pace is more interesting and exciting. And so it's definitely a place to think about if you're interested in the real estate business.
Chad, what would you say is the main skill set for acquisitions?
Good question. Very good question. I like to think in the real estate business in general, in investments, acquisitions, and in development, and really being an owner, you have to wear a lot of hats. You need to be able to wear a lot of hats. In a given day, I remember a few years ago, someone asked me, so what does your typical day look like? As a business owner, it can be quite varied. But, in the real estate business alone, if you take the kind of owning the business component out of it, I could be doing anything from, analyzing a deal in the spreadsheets to talking to the attorneys about legal structure to traveling out to a property to kick the tires and see the property itself and understand the market, talking to other players in the market about what their intentions are, of space and development, negotiating with adjacent landowners on what their plans are, what they're doing, how we might need them, talking to politicians. It's working with local politicians, regulatory agencies is a big part of the real estate business. So you need to be able to do all those things. And what is really great about the business is it doesn't take rocket science. It doesn't take to be a genius to be good at real estate. It takes passion, desire, there's been sometimes I meet people who are really successful in real estate and I'm like, they're a little bit of a head scratcher, but it's because if you're a little savvy, but really figure it out, you can do very well. And I love the business for that reason.
Great. Moving on, I guess, to my area, we'll talk about the financing. So typically a property owner will reach out to a bank or other institutions to help finance or provide a portion of the costs that it takes to buy the property or develop the property. So back to our example at King's Cross, they've worked with a number of banks that you would know. So Wells Fargo is a big player here in Europe. HSBC, it's a UK bank. I think they're active in the US. Barclays Bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, and a German bank called Helaba. So because it was such a big site, they had to get a consortium of banks to help them. But typically, if you were building a smaller project, you could approach one bank to help you finance the project. And so typically you will have, quite similar to equity, the same types of investors will actually be invested in the finance or in the debt that I also call it. So funnily enough, if you have a pension fund that's invested with Chad at AWH Partners, you could actually find that exact same pension fund invested with someone like me, a finance party or a lender. So it's actually the same investors or the same source of capital. And then you have obviously the big name investment banks that you would know, such as Goldman Sachs, Bank of America. They all have commercial real estate divisions. And a lot of them are buying, are lending all across the different property types. They're usually involved in the very big transactions. So that was something I wasn't quite aware of when I got into this industry, that you could go into investment banking and be involved in commercial real estate. And it's actually a very big sector for all of them. You could be in finance, but be involved directly with the pension funds. So these days, a lot of pension funds who used to give different companies money to invest on their behalf, they're actually starting to build up their own teams and lend to property on their own. So there's a lot of different avenues and a lot of different players that are actually financing property as well that you could pursue. So for a lot of the time, someone like AWH Partners would come to us and say, we've got a hotel development. Would you consider financing it? So a lot of the same analysis that they would have done on the equity side, you're doing on the debt side. And quite similar reasons why Chad liked acquisitions, why I like debt, is because on the debt side, you see a number of transactions. Normally, if someone on the equity is coming to you at the bank, it's because they've spent 3 years on this business plan. They've spent years toiling away, getting the permissions to build a project. And finally, when it's ready, they come to the bank. So it could be years before they come to us, but on the lending side, you're seeing so many transactions. So it's the volume of deal flow that I also like. So again, in a given year, we're looking at 50 to 60 different debt transactions across the market. And I think you learn a lot on the debt side because of that volume of deal flow. And quite similar to the acquisition side, you have agency firms like Cushman and Wakefield that have debt brokerage teams. So again, you could be in brokerage and help to transact between the owners of the property and the lenders of the property, bring them together to do a transaction. And that's also a very interesting place to start, because on the brokerage side, again, a large volume of transactions, big teams. It's a lot of hard work being in brokerage firms because it's usually tight deadlines. But at the same time, I know whenever there's an investment firm that's looking to hire, they really like hiring out of debt brokerages because of the level of experience that they get. So I would say if you want to go into finance, and even if you want to go into the equity side of things, if you start at any agency firm, the amount of experience that you get is always highly regarded when you then try to go into an investment team later on in your career.
Laura, it's a great points you're making about the finance business. I'm curious, leaving Colgate and starting at Quadrant, if you felt like you were, did you have the skill set to step into a finance role coming out of Colgate?
Yeah, and I think I hadn't had the finance background, so I hadn't done any finance classes. I was a pure economics major. I think I'd done one finance of economics class, but for the most part, it was all very new to me. But a lot of what you're finding at these firms is it's the ability to learn, which Colgate teaches you because of, the different fundamentals classes that you take, sort of self-study that you can take. It teaches you to get on a job and be a self-learner and a self-starter, which a lot of the time is what these companies need. Like you were saying, it's not rocket science. It's just that ability to and desire to learn and be enthusiastic that goes a long way, because at the end of the day, we're not engineers. What we're doing is not as difficult, but it's the same enthusiasm, the ability to learn and on your own and self-learn that sort of sets you apart and allows you to get onto a job like this without having the prior experience. That said, more and more millennials are very studious and are very advanced. Like I heard Charlotte had done Argus before she left Colgate. So the more that you can, and Argus, sorry, is a software for real estate, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I think the more you can do any sort of self-learning, which we'll come to later on, before leaving Colgate, the more you'd set yourself apart. But again, you don't need to worry necessarily about having that skill set when you arrive on the job, but it does help set your resume apart in a very competitive employment market.
Before we move to the next slide, I just wanted to also mention something about talking about brokerage, either debt brokers or someone who deals with acquisitions, leasing, et cetera. Again, not a lot of these investment firms hire straight out of college, and you'll find that out. Investors or developers, they don't really hire you know, green analysts, meaning like those that just graduated. So getting your foot in the door to as a debt broker or as, you know, a broker like myself or a leasing broker is a really great way to start, to then get to that next step if you so choose.
It's a very good point.
It's an excellent point, Charlotte. And I think a lot of people in real estate started at a bigger, what you might call brand name shop, Cushman and Wakefield, CBRE. You know, they're listed here under the agency firms, and then find their way to, you know, many owners like AWH Partners, they're smaller businesses. You know, we only have a couple of seats. We might hire, you know, a person or two in our acquisitions business a year. But you know, at a CBRE or Cushman Wakefield, there's a lot of seats. And so it's a great training ground and excellent, you know, path into the business.
And then we'll take it over to the planning and construction. So again, back to our case study, it took years. So they put in planning applications at King's Cross in 2001, and they only really got the building permit in 2006. So imagine it took 5 years to get the local authorities to give them approval to redevelop the site, which just shows how much work goes into redeveloping a project. Which Chad will speak to a little bit now.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Yeah, as I mentioned, I spent about 5 years of my career in the development business, and a lot of that was in the planning stage. At Related, we were buying land and building projects. And if you feel like you like real estate, but you might not want to be in a finance role or an acquisitions role, I think a place that is, you know, huge, there's a lot of different types of opportunities and a lot of different types of players is in the real estate, you know, development world. We'll go through some of them here. Clearly owners are developers of real estate. You have to buy land and get it financed and build it. And that's typically done by owners and developers. But the other parties involved, consultants, the list of planning consultants is long and varied. You know, from engineers and architects and design consultants are listed below. Traffic consultants, appraisers, you know, market analysts, and the list goes on and on. And those are all real estate roles. They're not, you know, directly acquisitions roles, directly development roles, but they're roles that are critical to the business. And it's a way, it might be a path into a different field, and many people find careers there. Political consultants are listed here at the bottom. A classmate of mine ended up in New York City as a consultant in the political realm, helping real estate developers get projects permitted. A huge part of the planning process in real estate development in the vast majority of markets is once you own the land or you've tied up the land and you're ready to, you know, you want to build something, is you plan it out, you draw it out, you take it into the local planning and zoning board and try to get it approved. And it is a very challenging, difficult, you know, mind-numbing, head-banging process that will exasperate most people. I mean, it's got, you know, you have to learn the political game really to be a good real estate developer in the vast majority of markets. And so on the consulting side, that can be, you know, helping developers navigate that process. There's also on the city or municipality side, there's roles in planning departments and, you know, zoning boards and that, you know, side of the business where you get to approve local, you know, projects. So point being, there's a lot of different roles in the real estate business, and these are all potential, you know, careers, and they're also all potential pathways into, you know, different parts of real estate. Construction is yet another, you know, massive industry that's directly tied to real estate. All construction is building real estate projects, whether they're for owner users who are building their own building, or for developers building a building for somebody else. the construction companies also vary very much in size and scale and type. And there's construction consultants who are strictly, helping, owners, developers, and want to be builders kind of put their projects together. There's managers who are managing projects for owners who are building things, and there's general contractors who are actually taking risk in the process of, bidding out, winning, and ultimately construction, building buildings. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved in the construction business as well.
And I will just note, for everyone watching this, it's worthwhile kind of noting which particular areas like interest you for X and Y reasons, because a lot of these calls that you'll have, down the road with Colgate alums that work in the industry, and you maybe want to get a job from them, what part of real estate do you want to get into? Oh, I'm just interested in getting into the real estate industry. And that's an answer that a lot of them, when I was in your shoes, I was taught to have a more pointed answer. So just kind of, it doesn't even need to be a very reasonable thing. It could be, like a pipe dream sort of job, but who knows? Just something that kind of, just be able to speak to the various kind of parts of the industry, because it's so big. In terms of what you'd like.
It's an excellent point. I meet with a lot of students and recent grads who are either in the business or trying to get into the business or recently in the business. And if someone's in my office and says, I just want to get into the business, I'm do you have any advice? I know they just started thinking about it. They're wearing on their sleeve the fact that they haven't spent the time yet to really understand what the different, roles in the business are. So it's an excellent point, Charlotte. If you spend the time and do a little soul searching and a lot of research, I think you will gravitate towards a certain area, and then you can go in and say, I want to be, in engineering consulting, or I want to be in acquisitions in the hotel space or the retail space. And then if you're in my office, I can say, oh, I know 3 people who do that. Let me put you in touch with those people. And so that gives you a real leg up.
And I get it. It's, everyone, when you're graduating, really all you want is a job, and all you want is to be in something in real estate so then you can figure it out. And shoot, we all kind of know that that's what's going on in your head, but just being able to have some response, even if it's not like, shoot, I don't know even right now. I mean, I'm only a year in what exactly I want to do either. And so it's just, it's not set in stone, but just having something to say as opposed to real estate.
Right.
So the next important stage is leasing the building. So once you've built your office building, now you're trying to find a tenant to occupy it. So at King's Cross, our case study, they've managed to lease offices to Google. Facebook is one of the tenants that's going to go in. Universal Music. Some of the retail tenants are companies that like Nike, and Samsung has a huge concept store. Actually, in that arch that you see there is actually a huge Samsung concept store. So it's really incredible. But this is an important part of real estate, because the true value of a building is the bricks and mortar, but it's also the income and the tenants and what they're paying and how stable they are. Because if you have 2 buildings right next to each other, one has no tenants, and one has tenants that are guaranteed to pay rent for the next 20 years, the one on my right, the one on my right is the one that's worth a lot more than the one that's vacant, even though they're right next to each other. So leasing is a very important aspect of commercial real estate. So quite similar to the acquisition and the finance side, they are leasing agents. So that's another specialty advisory group that's going to connect the owners of the property with tenants that are looking to occupy. And actually, I listed the tenants there as well because I have a friend of mine who used to work at Morgan Stanley, an equity side, and she wanted to change, and she's now working for Google, and she helps to find strategic locations. She helps to map out how much office space they're going to need for the next 5 to 10 years. So she came from a commercial real estate background. She's working for a tenant, which is Google, but she has a commercial real estate job within Google. So again, a lot of these big companies that you think of, Facebook, or the banks, they're going to have a real estate specialist to help to map out where they should all be occupying space. And then hopefully if you've leased the building, so for our example, the initial owners of King's Cross, they sold a big portion of their investment to Australian Super. So that's a big Australian pension fund. So they managed to lease a bunch of buildings, develop a lot on the site. And through that, they were able to find an investor who wanted to take a share of what they've built so far. It's not finished yet. There's still a few projects to complete. And actually, Chad, I didn't know if you realized, but Related is now an investor at King's Cross.
How about that?
Yeah, exactly. So they're in there. It's all full circle. But on a successful real estate story, once you've managed to lease the building and execute your business plan, really, you successfully exit, you call up Charlotte and tell the world that we have a great one here.
Yeah.
And Charlotte's going to hustle to find you the right buyer.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, thank you for that. And leasing, office leasing, retail leasing is another very, very popular and frequented position and area of the real estate industry that recent college grads go into. So that's another big one to look out for. But yeah, in terms of the exit and sale, there's a lot of reasons as to why a particular landowner wants to dispose and get rid of a property. In the middle markets realm that I'm in, I'm not necessarily dealing with, you know, London and Continental Railroads or DHL, but you know, a lot of the times we say it's the 3 Ds: divorce, death, and debt, or something like that. So, but in, you know, in terms of institutional size, it's very different. Exit, you know, we've been seeing a lot of agency positions throughout this whole timeline, and this is another big one. And it's just, you know, a broker would probably be hired and they go out and try to find the buyer. In terms of buyers for this site, I was speaking a couple months ago with Brian Collins, who's another Colgate grad, and he's head of development at Silverstein, but he was saying it's really challenging because, you know, when it came to either debt or when it came to exiting, it used to just be a very small group of potential buyers for MAT projects, but now it's become a lot more international and global, and you'll have some kind of, you'll see a lot of no-name foreign companies out of the Middle East or China or wherever sometimes come out of the woodwork and put up the cash to buy these things. But all very exciting, you know, positions and opportunities throughout the entire life cycle of the of real estate that we've touched on in this talk. But Laura, if you maybe want to switch to the last slide, we can kind of wrap this up and open up some questions.
And right before we jump into that, I think there's one area now that as we've gone through it, I'm realizing we left off, which is if you're not successful selling your property, property management and asset management are also a huge function in the business. And one of the things that we do at AWH every day is, you know, we own 30 odd hotels, and we're responsible. We own a management company that manages those hotels, and also a team run by a Colgate grad of asset managers that manage the manager. And asset managers essentially, it's a great role for new grads if you can find the right seat. They're essentially acting as the owner. And dealing with situations that might arise at a property taxes, you know, employment situations, leasing, you know, so an asset manager is effectively running the property for an owner. And at a property manager, you're actually, you know, running the day-to-day, probably paying the electric bills and making sure the engineering staff showed up to fix the, whatever the problem. So those are massive elements of the industry that are also good avenues for new grads.
Thank you. Yeah. So just to kind of wrap things up here, we put together kind of 3 steps in terms of what, we suggest kind of doing as an undergraduate. And, step 1 is educate yourself, and, doing things like this is an example of that. Trying to read news articles and publications, Real Deal, Biz Now, and there's a couple others on that list as well. Researching companies, reading books. If you ever want to speak to Kevin Danahy, he always says, read The Bigs by Ben Carpenter before speaking with me. So maybe some of you have read that thus far. And what else? Online courses, webinars. I mean, there are opportunities everywhere, and with COVID going on, there's more happening. Real Deal does weekly, I don't know if they're daily anymore, but weekly webinars at 5. There's Breaking into Wall Street or LinkedIn Learning classes. There's so many opportunities. So do one of them or do some of them, and that will put you ahead. You'll have things to speak about and talk about, and you'll be able to speak knowledgeably about them. Step 2, seek hands-on experience, whether that be an internship or you're shadowing, or you're visiting offices. And, I think that you can even really include that into kind of sometimes FaceTime calls or phone calls, and just trying to legitimately get experience out of a textbook. And then the last one is use the Colgate network. This is so important. And I kind of came to Colgate for lacrosse, but everyone I speak to that's young, that's looking at colleges, I say Colgate has the most crazy, ridiculous network ever, particularly in real estate. I owe my entire job search and success with that to the Colgate graduates, Chad and others, and everyone. So really, really use that. And every person you speak with Chad and you say you're interested in brokerage, he gives you my number, he gives you 5 other people's numbers, and then you talk to them and then they give you 3 numbers. So you start to build a little network of relationships. And so there's a lot of opportunities, and Colgate is so helpful. And Chelsea and David are great as well on the ground there. Excuse me. So that should complete it, unless Chad or Laura want to touch on something.
No, I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on. So we open it up to the floor for any questions.
And while you're thinking, I'll just add, one point. Hopefully, by the time you're looking for a job, the world is in a different place, or looking, probably for an internship, the world might be in the same place, or coming out of this place. But, Zoom and kind of the Colgate network are 2 things that are going to give you a leg up in finding that next step. And don't be shy just because it's COVID and people might be working from home. I've been on more Colgate calls with Colgate alumni who are, just more passionate than ever about Colgate, despite all the craziness in the world. And, I think there's a lot of willing people out there who are ready to connect when you want to have a conversation. And so, don't let what's going on get you down. One other thing I'll add is I've seen, and it's strictly anecdotal, but a couple of job offerings crossed my desk in the last last week, which I hadn't seen in the last 4 or 5 months. So it feels like some investment firms might be starting to hire, and people are also disrupted. People are moving back home, and people are, so there's a lot of interesting things going on in the business. And I think there's a lot of opportunity. Good. So David, how are these things typically wrapped?
Yeah, that was terrific. The reality is we usually wrap up now and then put a little bit of a plug in for next steps. So Chelsea will talk a little bit about the Colgate link, and I think that Chad, Laura, and Charlotte, you've already done a great job sort of plugging that anyways. Also showing the value of the Colgate professional networks above and beyond just the real estate network. With that being said, I'll certainly introduce myself. Again, I'm David Lovelace. I'm the Associate Director of Career Development here in the office. And all of our advisors are generalists, and we work with everybody regardless of where you are in the discernment process. But we also have industry liaison areas. And one of my areas is commercial real estate. So if this is an area of interest, I would invite you to come in and engage with me, and virtually, of course, right now. But certainly invite you to connect with me. And if we want to debrief a little bit about some of the messages and information that was shared here today, that would be a great place to start. If you already know your lane, like Charlotte was mentioning, it's a good idea to have a good understanding of the industry. If you already know where you want to go and how you're going to get there, I want to talk to you. But if you're also a person that has a ton of question marks right now and has no idea, and maybe this program was overwhelming for you even because it was just beginning, I want to talk to you also. So utilize our services and utilize me and engage with our office moving forward. But certainly the Colgate link that Chelsea's going to jump on will give you access to the 3 great presenters we had here today. So thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I would just echo. My name is Chelsea, and I'm the Assistant Director for Alumni Engagement and Career Services, and I'm on the team that has brought the Colgate link to Colgate. So the Colgate link is an online virtual platform for Colgate students and alumni, kind of like LinkedIn, but just for Colgate. So it's a really great opportunity, a great platform to connect with the 3 alums that are on this call and lots more. You can search by industry, interest, or identity too, or geography. And so you can filter down a lot to find exactly who you want to speak with. And to gain access to that, we are asking students to either have an appointment or to attend a workshop just to learn about the strategy of networking and a little bit more about the platform. And those workshops can be found on Handshake. So you can sign up to get the Zoom link for that. Or like David said, you can make an appointment with him or any of the other advisors. Following this presentation, we will share the recording of this. I know there were some people who are not able to attend, so we'll get the recording out. And I'd encourage you to reach out if you have any questions about accessing the link or getting in touch with any of our fabulous alumni. So Charlotte, Chad, and Laura, thank you so much.
Hey, Chelsea.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Brendan Jordan. I just
Hi.
wanted to add quickly on my behalf, I guess, a few things. One, thank the 3 of you guys so much for taking the time to talk with everyone this afternoon. But 2, just a quick background on myself. I know I've talked to Charlotte in the past, but I'm the vice president and alumni relations chair with the real estate club, and over the past few months I've been working with Kevin Denenga at Brookfield, interning with him this summer. And a big assignment of which I've done over the past few months has been to put together a playbook for the real estate club at school and how the real estate club interacts with both the CREC and more generally Colgate real estate professionals who are just out of college plus. So from our behalf, I just wanted to thank you guys again. And, I look forward to staying in touch with all you guys over the coming months. We've got some exciting things that Kevin, myself, along with the president of the club, Jack McKenna, have put together. So, I'd love to reconnect at a later point. I don't know everyone, in this call, but definitely want to emphasize just the importance and the strength of the real estate club at school. And just like the 3 of them had all mentioned, just the strength of the alumni network at school. So feel free to reach out. Brendan, Jordan, you know, you can find my contact information anywhere, but, you know, thanks again. And I thought this was great, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, everyone have a great rest of your day and stay well.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.